Hands off due process of law. Welcome to Law and Society. Please subscribe. And today we're going to talk about the massive protests that happened all over the country and then my protest on hands off due process of law. So let's get started. What's very interesting is that there were about 2.5 to 3 million Americans who were out on the streets from everywhere, from New York to Chicago to Seattle to small towns like Malibu, all over, even from red states to battleground states to blue states. There were massive protests everywhere. And you know what? There was no violence. Today, I want to thank everybody who went out with their hands-off signs and protested peacefully. You honored the Constitution today by peaceably protesting and having our grievances heard. You are a symbol of what America is. And no matter what, keep up the protests. Peaceful protests. That is your right when you're on American soil. Remember that. This is just the beginning of these protests. They will grow as Donald and his regime impose more insane cuts and layoffs. They will grow when more people are kidnapped and detained or deported. It will grow if Social Security is broken. They will grow if Medicare, Medicaid are broken. These protests will grow when schools close down, when differently abled children cannot get state services and support that they need, when infectious diseases kill people, children and adults the same, when people stand with our allies, when we stand with Ukraine, when we stand with humanity, when we stand with democracy, when women suffer because of repressive and prohibitive abortion policies, we are going to say hands off and we are going to stand up. When people are deprived of due process of law, Judge Boasberg ordered the return, or I think it was Judge Boasberg or another judge. A federal judge ordered the government to bring back the man from Maryland who they admit self-admittedly deported because of an administrative error. And the government's response, Donald Trump's response, was effectively that they are not in our jurisdiction anymore because they're in El Salvador. Well, you know where the jurisdiction begins? The jurisdiction begins at the place the incident took place. It begins if that coincides with the place where that person resides. It begins where the American authorities took these people and kidnapped them without due process of law, without reading them their rights, without giving them the opportunity to talk to a lawyer. This is due process of law that they were denied. And now Donald Trump's government is saying that we can't bring them back because we don't have jurisdiction, and neither do the courts over the government of El Salvador. Yeah, we don't have the jurisdiction over the government of El Salvador, but the federal judge has jurisdiction over the federal government, and it has jurisdiction over the people who were abducted from places where they reside. So those places have jurisdiction not only on the government, but also over the people who were there legally, like this Maryland man, or the 3 kids who were seeking asylum and had their appointments coming up, or to the gay hairdresser who has never been in any gang, because all ICE went off of were tattoos. So the fact that these Children, and then you have Mahmoud Khalil being picked up. Then you have Ms. Ozturk being picked up from Tufts University, who are detained now by the American government without due process of law. That is unconstitutional. That is a violation of the Constitution. And in Cory Booker's 25-hour speech on the floor of the Senate, he talked many times about Antonin Scalia, one of the most conservative, until now, justices to have ever sat on the Supreme Court bench, saying that if you are on American soil, you have the due process of law. We are afforded these rights when we land in the United States. American citizens carry these rights with us wherever we go. But if you are not an American citizen, and if you come into the United States legally, or if you are undocumented, whatever the case, when you step on American soil, the constitutional protections that are available to all people, equal protection under the law, is required for all people. There is no provision in the Constitution that says equal protection of law only applies to citizens of the United States. It says all persons. So when you pick up people like Mahmoud Khalil, and if you pick up people like Ms. Ozturk from Turkey, who was at Tufts University, and Khalil from Columbia, first of all, these universities need to protect their students. Secondly, where are their due process rights? They are here legally. The ones that I'm talking about, Mahmoud Khalil, green card holder, Ozturk, student visa, this person from Maryland who is the father of a disabled child, he was on a protected status because he came from Cuba, and he was repeatedly put on protected status. These are people who are in the United States legally, and you just deport them or you detain them indefinitely. Can you imagine the trauma this is putting them through? Can you imagine the chilling effect it's going to have on other places around the world where they are thinking about sending their kids to college in the United States, where freedom of speech is paramount? Nowhere is the freedom of speech more paramount than in the United States. It is our First Amendment right. And that right attaches to anybody who lands up in the United States. They can speak their mind if they do so peacefully. So I don't agree with what any of those people say in their pro-Hamas or pro-Palestine. Maybe I agree with some of them, maybe I don't, but that's not the point. The point is that they were exercising their right to free speech, and our government has deprived them of due process of law. With that said, please call your representatives and senators about this deprivation of rule of law of people around the country, and we don't even know how many. We barely know how many. We don't know what's up with all of the other 250 or so people who were deported. We don't know how many other students or other people with legal status have been picked up. Their stories are coming out. It's trickling down. And if there are 5 stories like this, there are 5 more stories like this that we don't know about. So demand the release of these people on to proper U.S. custody so they can be processed. And if then they are deported, fine. But you owe them due process of law. America owes them due process of law. Hands off due process of law. Because if they don't have due process of law, none of us have due process of law. They can pick up citizens who are speaking truth to power up and disappear them. They can actually follow through on threats to members of Congress like Pam Bondi threatened Jasmine Crockett. We cannot let our government get to that point. With that said, thank you so much for listening. Please like and subscribe. You know, this is a one-man show, and I'm doing my best to talk to you about something or another every day, because something or another is happening every day that needs to be talked about. So, thank you for listening, and I will talk to you soon.